Hey, welcome to Cinema Gulp, you dirty hippies. I'm Ben.
And I'm John.
And this is our Gulp review of
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay, so we just got back from seeing QT's latest film. It was nice to see it pop out in the summertime.
I think we both said this was our most anticipated film of the year, and it lived up to that for me. I was really excited to see this movie going into it, and coming out of it, it was a great time at the movies. I did not expect it to be as funny as it was. I know
comedy.
Quentin Tarantino movies are always funny. His dialogue always finds a way to make you laugh, even if it's kind of cruel at times. But this was kind of played for laughs. I think it was really a comedy in my book. And I enjoyed it. I had a great time with this movie.
I agree. It's another polished, excellent, hilarious screenplay by Quentin Tarantino. He did his homework on this one. He builds tension. He builds atmosphere. This movie, though possibly not as cinematic looking from cinematography standpoint, the set pieces are incredible. This is his kind of love to Hollywood, where he grew up and what he loves about it in that era, which is obviously his favorite because he's been pulling from that era for a long time.
For sure, and it really shows. I mean, he really captured that era really well, showing off all the famous places that we all knew from that era, that show up in other movies and stuff like that and have been talked about for years, the classic Hollywood. He just brought it to life in such a great way. I agree with you about the cinematic element of this movie, that it kind of lacked what his last three films, and even with like the Kill Bill films, his first couple films to me feel very indie, the world he came from, the world he created to some degree, built so many disciples that follow Quentin Tarantino out of that kind of 90s independent scene.
They tried.
But once he got to like Kill Bill, he really stepped it up to be a bit more cinematic. And I feel like the last three films all kind of felt very Hollywood and cinematic in that way. The Inglourious Bastards through Hateful Eight films.
Yeah.
And this is a little step back to his more gritty indie feel of filmmaking.
I was so happy about that. For the last, I guess it's been 10 years, he's been exploring other centuries and other decades and lots of things in history. And even though this one is in the 60s, it does feel a little return to form as far as he's getting back to that bro, chill, let's talk in the car, hey, what's up with you? And I love seeing that, and I've really missed that, because though I love his dialogue when cowboys are saying it, I like it more when it's just kind of like these jive talking 60s guys. So that's why it really popped for me, was because I was so happy to see people in cars and in bars talking QT dialogue again.
Yeah, he's like the king of cool.
Yeah.
And this era is just, that's all you can say about the 60s. It's just cool, man. It's cool, man. I mean,
and everything in
really
this movie is cool.
Yeah.
Everything in this movie is cool. Like
music. Let's talk about how he utilized, as Tarantino always is a master at implementing the music in his films.
Yeah.
And he doesn't miss a beat here, I wouldn't say.
No, it's great. The one criticism I'll have involves the music, but not solely because of the music, and that's that this movie's too long. I don't think anyone will say it's the perfect length, because it's not. It's too long. And some of the things you could cut are there's like a scene where Brad Pitt is just driving for maybe 5 minutes, where it's just changing song after song, which is great, and I know that's what Quentin Tarantino likes to do, but that's one of the criticisms I have, and it has to do with a lot of him just wanting to play that soundtrack.
Yeah. It does seem like he just wants a little more time on screen to play his soundtrack, so he creates these overlong scenes of people wandering the streets of Hollywood, whether it's Margot Robbie's character or the scenes of her wandering the streets. I felt like he was taking a page from Roman Polanski. If he add some acid jazz, I'd feel like I was watching Repulsion.
Dude!
Wandering around the streets for so long.
That's hilarious, man. That's perfectly well said, because that's exactly right.
But every character, or at least every kind of major character, kind of has these moments that go on for too long of just watching them wander, so we can see how he's recreated 60s Hollywood so well.
Your turn with the foot?
Yeah, my turn to talk about foot fetish. There's another aspect that Quentin certainly worked into his movie.
Holy moly.
Overused in this movie.
I have to go back to every Tarantino movie now and see if there's an emphasis on feet as much as there is in this movie, holy God, there's some, and it's all the hippie.
Yeah.
It's all women's feet. There's no, I don't think it's men's feet.
Because his foot fetish is for women's feet. It better damn well be.
I wanted to see Bruce Dern's feet because the rest of them wasn't looking that great. Let's talk about the pacing of the movie because that's like the dark horse. Because if I had a problem with the movie, the second act is a little. Do we need that? It's still great. It's still a moment. It's still a scene. It's shot by Tarantino. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Mm-hmm. But there's just some things where when the movie's done, you're like, because a lot of it is really setting up. And the movie's got just such great setup. It shows you that this guy is one of the best filmmakers in the world and has been for a long time and always will be because filmmaking has a lot to do with setup and he does it so well. But there are things that I feel, because we've said this before, not on the show, this is the first Tarantino movie we've gotten to review on Cinema Gulp, but because of the loss of Sally Menke, which she had so much to do with making his movies as perfect as they were. And I feel since Inglourious Bastards, after that, because that was her last one, they've been over long.
Yes,
100%.
And
and I think it has a lot to do with him now just taking control of the edit bay. This is me speculating, but that's what it feels like. Because when you're a director, even when you're in film school, and I would shoot films, I would be like, I'm keeping this. I like it. I like it. I'm keeping it.
It's my vision.
I think she did not let him do that, which was why he loved her so much. Yeah. And I think now he's just taken control of the edit bay.
I agree. Yeah, and it's sad to see because this one could use some of that Menke cutting. But there were still some really fun edits. I don't want to give anything away, but there's an excellent one when it deals with the history of Brad Pitt's character and his wife. That edit is just fucking spectacular.
I know what you're talking about.
But yeah, there's some fun editing in the movie. There's even some kind of moments that I thought felt like Darren Aronofsky, where he was doing like the quick cuts to show you a segment.
He did that a couple times. It had that almost Edgar Wright thing to it.
So
film loading.
It had the flair, the fun of his editing that we've seen in the past, but it also had, as you kind of brought up, an easy breezy style to this film that let it linger a little bit longer, and where maybe it hampers the pacing a little bit.
And again, like, we get a Tarantino movie 3, maybe every 4 years, so you can give me as much of it as you need. But if I had to say the story could be tighter, it would only be in that aspect. And I can't say that's because of the writing, because the editing can chop out certain things. And there's a lot of these scenes, there's nothing really happening. So I wouldn't say
100%.
It's not story beats you'd have to cut out. It's just, hey, I got Hollywood for this amount of time. Yeah. I'm shooting this shit. I'm changing the city around. I got a $90 million budget. Yeah. I'm fucking showing Margot Robbie walk across the street to the Cinerama Dome. You mentioned Brad Pitt in that scene. Do you want to talk about the main actors?
Truly the lead of the film is DiCaprio.
Yes.
I mean, Brad Pitt's got a huge role, but DiCaprio is truly the lead of the film, and reminding you of how great this guy is.
Oh
comedy.
My God.
I mean, if you didn't love him in Wolf of Wall Street and find him to be one of the funniest actors working in that particular film, this one is just another notch on his belt of how funny this guy could be. He needs to do a few more comedies in his career because he is hilarious. And physical comedy. He's really good at the physical comedy.
DiCaprio is an unstoppable force in this movie. He is on fire. And you know what I like about his performances in the 2 Tarantino movies? Tarantino really lightens him up because he takes himself very seriously. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street was that first break out of his shell and show that he's as funny as Jim Carrey if he wants to be.
Yeah.
But like, he takes himself very seriously. And the Tarantino movies, he's just having so much fun, and he is so good in this movie. He's my favorite performance of the year for sure. I gotta say, it's one of my favorite performances of his. Half of it feels like he's playing Calvin Candy when he's in the movie scenes where he's shooting the movies. And then just the character who he is, this just like unsure of himself. He's so hard on himself. I could have just watched the whole movie about his acting career and him shooting scenes as they pop in Timothy Olyphant and Luke Perry, God rest, final performance. It was good for what he had.
Watching him deal with the other actors on set, dealing with the director and the wardrobe department and things like that. That stuff was great. I could have taken a whole film with that and not necessarily needed the Margot Robbie side of the story. But we get why it's there. It's this connection to the history of Hollywood and
I think this is the best writing he's ever done to convey two men's friendship and how one feels about it and how the other feels about it and how one really needs the other so much and how one will always be there for the other one. Their dynamic was insanely awesome and it was so unique. How you see how the friendship was set up from the beginning and how it's like kept going where, DiCaprio's character, like Dalton is constantly needing him for things and sending him to go do things, and it's kind of funny. He takes him for granted, but he loves him, and Brad Pitt's another one who I loved him in this movie. I haven't loved Brad Pitt in a movie in a long time. What he did was he finally didn't play Brad Pitt. He was this other guy, and I loved it that he embraced like his age a little bit. Dude still looks freaking incredible, but he's letting that become part of the dialogue and stuff as he's becoming like an aging stunt guy. I loved all of his scenes with his dog. I love the dog.
The dog was great.
DiCaprio and Pitt are so good at like creating character that they're just born to be with QT because like there's all those little subtle things that Cliff Booth, Pitt's character, does when he gets into his trailer that you gotta wonder, was it written or were they going, what would be really funny is if he just plops his dog food like 5 feet up in the air into his bowl. And
there's so many little details, especially like even in that scene alone, that play into the finale of this film. Like this movie had some great setup that you think, even though there's a couple scenes that we felt, this is running on too long, why is this necessary? This probably could be cut from the film. But once you see how the finale of this film plays out, you realize there's a lot of callbacks that they set up early in the film that you think mean nothing or they're just there for extra QT fluff because they're fun or entertaining. But they really do play into the finale of the film to some degree. Almost everything that I kind of caught on while watching the film was like, was that necessary? Where's that going? What's the reason for that? It all kind of comes full circle by the end of the film. So I was really impressed with that.
Well, we talked about that right after we saw it, that it's not telegraphed, it's not predictable. It's not like, hey, that's going to be useful later.
Exactly.
That's what Tarantino's so good at, these little details. And just even like when towards the end, there's just this great camera shot where you're seeing nothing, but it looks like it's part of the street they live on. And then you see that old car with all the smoke come up with the 3 people inside of it. It just kind of comes up, and the sound design is so great, and the shot is so crisp. I don't know what it is. Like, there's always 5 or 6 shots in every Tarantino movie where I'm like, no one else can do that.
Yeah,
like, and it's not even something that some people in the theater would even catch.
Yeah.
But it just blew me away, just the detail of the shot of the car and the sound, and how he racks up what a piece of shit the car is. Like, I just love that stuff.
There's some great use of sound design to create tension in the. I think every scene that deals with the Manson family in this movie actually has a very eerie tension to it. There's one specific scene where they go to the ranch that the Manson family stays at. That is a very tension-filled scene, even though it still has some humor. There's just an intensity to that scene that, because it's in a Quentin Tarantino movie, it takes some time for this scene to play out. But that whole scene, I was a little bit on edge of like, what's gonna happen here?
That was one of those scenes that people were like, accepting of the length of it, because without that length, without everything that happens in that whole ranch scene, it wouldn't be as tense as it was. It was perfectly paced.
Yes. I expected maybe more of Al Pacino. He was
I loved him,
in his
though.
one scene, but the way the movie started with him in that scene, I thought there was gonna be more. And what I realize now, one thing that I think you took some issue with in the film, the way it's structured, it's another very unique play on timeline that Quentin Tarantino implements in this movie. And I didn't realize we were kind of seeing one weekend take up the first half of the movie, and then kind of another. They catch you up on time in between these 2 weekends, and then you kind of get to the final weekend of the tragedy that everybody knows took place in this.
Supporting cast is great, but this is not really an ensemble movie. This is a character piece between 2 guys, and to a lesser extent, Margot Robbie, who didn't have a lot to do in this movie. It's not that she did anything bad, but every time you saw her, she was shaking her ass and dancing to records. I think that there was a lot of speculation when this movie was filming, and then they put out a little teaser, and the way Tarantino was talking about it, that it was gonna be sort of the culmination of his universe, where like you had, because he always has these connections where like, like the Bear Jew is like great-grandfather to the sleazy movie producer and True Romance.
I love that.
I love all that stuff.
That's
it's
perfect.
A lot of people thought it was going to be this movie that like brought all those things like into, and it couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, It barely reference. It doesn't do a lot of like Tarantino referencing.
As many as you might expect.
Yeah, and I like that. It just felt like a new Tarantino movie, an original Tarantino movie. It's not a cowboy movie. It's not necessarily a gangster movie.
Yeah.
It's just a cool, awesome Tarantino movie.
Yeah. The N-word. There is no use of the N-word in this movie, thankfully. That's fine. There was no need for it.
What'd they replace it with?
But they replace it with, you damn dirty hippies. They say hippies as many times as they would normally say the N-word in a Quentin Tarantino
I haven't heard that word in a long time either, hippie. The people just hate hippies.
Everybody hates the hippie. So I guess one little criticism I still had, we talked about the music, and there's great use of songs that you haven't always heard. Tarantino always finds these gems that aren't, the radio play 70s hits that you hear on KLOS all the time.
Yeah, sometimes you think they're making them for the movie, and then you realize they're old songs.
And I did notice a number of times, like, the lyrics of the song certainly match what we're seeing in the film. I mean, it needs to be that way, but so there was great use of music, but it didn't stand out as much as I feel certain Quentin Tarantino music drops do, because there's always kind of a juxtaposition of the era the music is from and the era the film is taking place in. And he does a great job with especially some of his films that take place outside of the era of rock and roll.
Yeah.
But this one taking place in the time period that the actual music we're hearing comes from, it had less of that kind of impact, I think, that sometimes Quentin music does.
Yeah.
But still used really well in some great selections.
It was still the same music, but you're right. Like every 90s movie he did, you would never. Jackie Brown, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, no one ever turned on the radio, and Backstreet Boys were playing. It was always an old song, and everyone, even in Kill Bill, he always uses music from the 70s and below, always, in everything, even in the westerns. I think he maybe did a David Bowie song, which I think was an 80s David Bowie song in Inglourious Basterds, which was amazing.
Great.
See these eyes so green.
He had to use it from the era because he didn't want to like Baz Luhrmann it and have like some 90s or 2000s music playing in the 60s, thank God.
Yeah.
Keep rolling, 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 rolling. Keep rolling, 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 rolling.
Okay, this is a Tarantino movie. This is a movie starring Brad Pitt. It's a movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio and many, many, many others. So it's not going to get a low gulp score from me. I loved this movie. I loved the screenplay. It didn't have the cinematography of some of the other ones, nor did it really need it. It still had the Pulp Fiction-y cinematography, the street level cinematography. It had mystery, it had intrigue. It was so funny. Some of the best performances as of late from those two lead actors. Margot Robbie was a bit of a weak point, not her fault, just why cast her if she doesn't really have anything to do, but she does look a lot like her though. But yeah, this is my favorite movie of the year for sure. So happy to say that because it was our most anticipated. It's Quentin Tarantino. Cinema Gulp's interviewing a Tarantino movie for the first frickin' time. I love it. I give this movie 9 gulps.
Awesome, 9 gulps. That is excellent. That's a great score. I agree with everything you said in terms of loving this cast, loving that it's Tarantino working. Bringing back some of what we love from original films, but still continuing to make the Tarantino-verse interesting. Telling a very interesting story that does have some mystery, some misdirection, some things that you're not necessarily prepared for, some things you think you're going to get and you're not going to get. So I enjoyed kind of the journey we went on. I do agree it's a little bit too long. I think there's some pacing issues that some editing needed to be done. But I don't think we'd lose much story if they just edit it in the right spots. So I think there could be a tighter film here in this movie, but it's Tarantino. We expect it to be long. We want it to be long. As you said, we only get them every couple years, so give us as much as we can get. I loved it. I'm definitely gonna check this movie out again. It was one of my favorites of the year. So for me, Quentin Tarantino's latest, his 9th film. Hopefully he does not stop at 10. I want plenty more Quentin Tarantino. I'm gonna give this a 7.75.
You know what? Let's go top 3, man. I'll give you my top 3. I have 3 as Inglourious Basterds, 2 as Reservoir Dogs, and 1 as Pulp Fiction.
So I think I have Pulp Fiction as 1, Inglourious is 2, Reservoir is 3.
Wait,
We're
you
very
just went
close.
the reverse order.
Of you.
Yeah.
Of you.
No, but I went from lowest. I went from 3, 2, 1. You went 1, 2, 3.
We hope you all fully know our thoughts on Quentin Tarantino's filmography. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
He is a brilliant filmmaker. If you're not huge or you don't know a lot about his filmography, which is pretty rare, but if you don't, these will change your life if you're interested in getting into film, for sure.
100%.
So if you like this review, click like and or subscribe to Cinema Gulp today. Leave some comments in the comments section. Where can they find us, John?
Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Look for us under Foot Fetish or Cinema Gulp.
Either one. Until next time, I'm Ben.
And I'm John.
We drink your motherfucking cinema.